This is the story about the boom and bust mine town of Leadfield, California. There's an old saying that was quoted by Mark Twain about gold mines and gold mining. The quote went like this: "A gold mine is a hole in the ground with a liar at the top." In later years, the Detroit Free Press was noted as quoting, "A mine is a hole in the ground. The discoverer of it is a natural liar. The hole in the ground and the liar combine and issue shares and trap fools." Some would say that both of these quotes couldn't be more true of an example of the story of Leadfield. However, as you will see, others will beg to differ. Most of these old mine camps were not the places you would have wanted to invest any money or even buy property. Sure, there's a few old towns that were known for their boom, but there are a whole lot more that are known for their bust. And this town was just one of those kind of towns. In fact, this town barely lasted a year. It all started way back in 1905, when a couple of prospectors discovered some good-looking ore here. This was around the same time as when the big discoveries were happening over in the Bullfrog Mining District just across the border around Blair and Rhyolite. Anyways, these prospectors grabbed some ore samples and took them into Rhyolite to get some assays done and found out that this ore was grading around $40 a ton. Not bad cash for back then. So the two miners set up a company called the Death Valley Consolidated Mining Company and even sold shares in the operation. However, it didn't take long before these couple of guys found out that after all the mining, transportation, milling, and smelting costs, there was no money left. And so after about 6 months, the company closed up shop and they abandoned the claims. These claims sat idle for almost 20 years when in 1924, 3 miners came in and staked up the ground. These 3 guys worked these claims for the lead ore for over 1 year and then sold the claims to a man by the name of John Salisbury. Now, this John Salisbury fella wasn't what one would call a miner, however. He was actually more of a salesman. First thing old John did was set up a company called the Western Lead Mines Company, with 1.5 million shares of stock worth 10 cents each. Within a few months, he had accumulated around 50 more mining claims and had over a dozen men on the payroll. They installed a compressor for air tools and built a road out to Beatty. Then they ran a water line to the mine, and by January of 1926, a small town was starting to take shape. That same month, the shares of the company were opened on the San Francisco Exchange, and within 24 hours, 40,000 shares had been sold, with the price skyrocketing to $1.50 a share. Then, in February, a man by the name of Charles Julian appeared in town. Old Charles here was a well-known, big-time stock promoter. Charles had made his fortune promoting oil companies over in California, and he had money to spend. Not only did he buy stock in the Western Lead Mining Company, he also became the president. Charles was just the shining star that this camp needed, as there were other companies also trying to cash in on the boom. By the end of that month, there were reports saying there were hundreds of men working the mines, and talk of a 500-ton mill were being floated about along with ore grades as high as 30% lead and more than 7 ounces per ton silver. It seemed the sky was the limit. However, the California State Corporation Commission was not impressed with what was going on. You see, the company hadn't gotten any approvals or permits for any of this work, and yet here they were, selling stock like there was no tomorrow. None of this stuff mattered to Charles, though. He had the workers continue on tunneling and was buying machinery along with plans for a town site. On March 15th, Charles had a big promotion put on where there were over 1,500 investors and visitors came to the town site to see this mine. There was a big meal put on that fed over 1,000 people that day, and the promoting must have been real good as the price of the shares were up to $3.30 by the end of that month. The Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad even sent representatives to the site to get an estimate of the ore for running a rail line there. In the meantime, plans were submitted to the local county for a town site to be surveyed, and it sure wasn't going to be some small town either. These plans were showing a town site with almost 1,800 town lots. Now, while all of this was going on, some of the other companies were also busy raising money, selling stock, and getting ready to mine. One company in particular, called the New Roads Company, was running full steam ahead, as they were wanting to be the first mine to be pulling ore out of the ground. They even went ahead and announced that its first shipment of $50 to $90 ore would soon be ready. As word got out, more companies started coming into the area, and in August of that year, the camp got a post office. This alone put Leadfield on the map as a prominent mining camp. But it didn't last long. In the months that followed, tunnels and shafts that were being dug ended up getting ore assays of only 2%, and not the 20 to 30% like the geologists had thought. To make matters worse, another company that Charles was involved in had its stock halted because of some wrongdoings, so this left Charles almost broke. This was a holding company, which Charles used as a backup for financial support. Of course, now that Charles, who was the big promoter of the town, was out of the picture, and the stock market commission breathing down his neck, investors weren't ready to put up any money into any of the mines in the Leadfield camp. It was only a matter of time before it all collapsed like a house of cards, and the other mines slowly closed, one after another, and Leadfield became a ghost town. The post office, which opened just a few months earlier, closed in January of 1927. Charles left town and went to Oklahoma, where there was an oil boom going on, and started promoting the Julian Oil and Royalties Company. After a few years of operation, he was indicted for defrauding investors, but he skipped town and fled to Shanghai, China in 1933. It is reported that he committed suicide a short time later. Since 1927, very little exploration has been done around the Leadfield area as miners and investors had written the camp off. However, there was a report by the California Bureau of Mines and Geology in 1938 that stated the main ore-bearing ledges of Leadfield carried lead ore of 5 to 7% per ton and around 5 ounces of silver per ton. This would have been enough to support a small mining operation. You can still go out to Leadfield today. It's just west of Beatty, and then you follow the Titus Canyon Road into where the old town site used to be. Very little remains except some old buildings and a few tailing dumps, but some people say it is worth the drive. I hope you enjoyed this short story about the boom and bust of Leadfield. Please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to bring you more old lost mine stories.